And like you say, with that specificity that says, actually, that's the bit I was interested in,
Right.
and the ability to observe that, well, now you improve that piece of data quality. And if half your organization is asking for that piece of information, and that piece of information gets more accurate, the noise around our data being rubbish, it starts to drop down. It starts to fall away because you're focusing on the things that people are most interested in the right ways.
Hey, everybody, this is Kaycee Lai, founder of Prometheum, and I have a very special guest with me today on the Data Fabric Show. With me today is Matthew Clark. Matthew, or I like to call him Matt, actually leads all of data and analytics at National Grid Energy Transmissions.
Electrical transmissions.
Thank you for correcting me. Matt has a very esteemed career in terms of leading data teams. Prior to this, he was at Sky. Prior to that, he also held senior data leadership roles at AstraZeneca, et cetera. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, Matt, but all the cool things and great things that you've done. And so I want to talk about a couple things today. One is obviously we're living in this GenAI world where it's changed workflows, it's changed technologies, it's changed applications, how we interact with that. So I think that's pretty interesting in terms of how, being a data leader, you have to respond to that now. But I think I always found it a little bit challenging for data leaders in that they're often in these really tough situations where they have to either turn things around or they have to build something from scratch, and it's always something a little bit different, and they're always under the gun in terms of time, in terms of resources, either money or people or both. And so, I wanted to kind of talk to you about that, Matt, since you led data teams now at a number of different companies, different industries, for that matter. So now maybe, you can kind of share with us kind of your view, what you've seen so far in your career.
Yeah, I mean, I think data's it's sort of everywhere and nowhere. It's one of those very difficult things that we find ourselves in these spaces where, everybody's interested in data, and GenAI, as you said, hasn't made that any easier for us. It's something that boards are interested in, executives are interested in. Data is generally one of those sort of things where everybody knows it's important, but might not necessarily understand it. And they bring in sort of CDOs, or those sort of CDO roles that are sort of changed over time. Very similar to when the CIO role first arose. It was something that sort of people saw as a sort of a career-ending type of role. It didn't last very long. And of course, as the years have gone and it's matured, and today our data roles, those sort of CDOs, those sort of data leadership roles, I feel that they've sort of fallen into a number of different camps.
That's interesting.
And I've sort of broken those down into sort of 4 varying camps of data roles, or the types of CDOs. So I always found it quite interesting that you come in, and it's always really important when you take these kind of roles to actually find out what kind of role that people are actually after. Because you're never entirely sure. So people want you to do something with data, but what? What kind of role that is. And the first kind of role that I find that often people have is what I refer to as the caretaker. Right. So this is an organization that perhaps isn't going to do anything particularly innovative with data. They've got something that works for them, and somebody's moved on, and they want someone to make sure that their data platforms, their services, their capabilities, their analytics continues to be stable. A knowledgeable person that sits and makes sure these things run.
So they just basically want one person to talk to be accountable for it. They don't necessarily need you to do anything.
Change. No, don't want to rock the boat. I've got pipelines, I've got databases, I've got this stuff. It's all very neat and tidy, and I just wanted to keep working. And so
I'd be lying if I said I don't know any of those CDOs. There's a lot. Yes, go on.
It is true. It is true. But I would find that generally speaking, those things aren't coming through because people come in and they bring their own ideas. But that kind of role is something that does happen over time anyway. Just you naturally fall into that caretaker role, no matter which way you started or potentially can. The second kind of role that I always, which is the one that I find is probably the most prevalent is what I call the arsonist. And this is the kind of role where you've got problems with data. Everybody knows you've got problems with data. Everybody's frustrated that they can't get to it or it's not fulfilling its potential. And so they need someone to elicit a change. And I call it the arsonist is because generally that means burning down what's there and starting again. The unfortunate thing with the arsonist role, and it's and I've done this a few times, where you have to come in and you have to.
You're saying you're a repeat arsonist.
Well, no, it's not the role.
Podcast. It's recorded. Yeah.
But it's not the role you want. Like, you understand it, and you always end up having to play this role a little bit, no matter what role you play.
Yeah.
But it's about the fact that you have to look at process and culture. You have to look at your systems, your platforms, and lots of things within the organization. People have been there a long time and these things, and they're very proud of what they're doing. And if you're coming in to sort of transform that, you're kind of burning down these platforms. You're burning down these.
You kind of have to, right? I mean, if someone's bringing you in because there's problems to fix, chances are those problems are there because of infrastructure, tools, people, process that already exist today. So there's no way of fixing them unless you actually make some changes, right? So that's, I mean, wouldn't you say that's most common? Like, isn't it when someone says, I need a CDO, usually isn't that because they want to fix a problem? Or do you think those are more rare than like the caretaker?
Well, I think it's because, yes, I think your organizations want to fix a problem, or they want to do more with data, or they want to do these different things. But if you're trying to set these kind of fires, the challenge are when you come in to make that transformation, when you're that change catalyst, when you're burning down the platforms and burning down the processes. Unfortunately, what you also tend to do along the way is burn all of the bridges that you have with the people that need to build it back up again. And so these roles tend to be a couple of years, which is one of the reasons these roles don't last very long, because having got to a point where everyone's gone, oh, we are in trouble. We know we now need to change.
Do you think you're like a bearer of bad news in a way?
Very much, yeah. And once you've got to that point, you might find yourself in a situation where, having burnt all of those bridges, I'm probably not the right person to rebuild that. And that's where I say, and this is the role that you want. This is the greatest role, and this is the one that I would call the phoenix.
Right.
So from the ashes of whatever's come before comes the phoenix. You rise from those ashes, and that's your transformation role. This is full recognition within an organization that says there's a problem here. Someone's pointed it all out. It's all been trashed. Everybody has recognized we need to do something brand new. We need to do something. We need to make that change. And that's where the Phoenix roles come in. That's where you're doing a transformation. That's when you're doing something innovative. That's when you're taking what you've got and you have an opportunity to try something new, be that technology or new processes or new people or whatever that might be. You have this opportunity to shape a new strategy in a new direction. And that's a Phoenix role. They're the ones you want.
Well, and you're doing it without any burnt bridges. You're free, no pun intended, right? No pun intended. And so you're the fresh face, if you will. So everyone still likes you, but someone has, basically done the tough work, right? Of, leveling buildings, and, if you continue with the imagery of arson, right? But, someone's actually done all the hard work, fought all the tough internal battles, especially large companies, right? There's going to be lots of just politics, etc. And so you get to come in and say, great, now let's actually go build. Right. And we can actually build because there's no tearing down. Someone's already done that. So that's the third role.
So that's the third role. And that's where you get these great opportunities. And for me, the challenge is that they often are rare. And what you often find is that you're probably somewhere between an arsonist and a phoenix. You're rising up, but you're finding more stuff that you need to burn down as you're rising up. So you end up sort of trapped between those things. The change agents are the ones that are probably the most common, and then the phoenix are the lucky ones that get that opportunity.
Right.
But then I always say that there is a fourth role, and whether you're a caretaker, an arsonist, or a phoenix, eventually you have the potential to end up being the scapegoat. And that's the biggest challenge of all of these things, be it you're caretaking, but you're not advancing, you're not taking advantage, you're not looking to the future, you're not transforming, you're maintaining a status quo, which is now becoming out of date, and people are hearing things about new stuff that you're not maintaining, and the caretaker can fall foul and become the scapegoat for a data position.
And you're going, well, dude, I'm tired. I'm exhausted from fighting all those battles and like burning all these things and then building it back up. Like, and things are working now. Can we just let things? So it's totally understandable that you want to kind of get into that mode because of all the difficult challenges and the battles you fought. But yeah, I can see how it's very easy to pick on that person and say, for example, why are we so slow to adopt GenAI, right? That's probably something we hear a lot these days.
And that's right, yeah. And like I say, across those three roles, you know, the caretaker moving too slowly, the arsonist being too aggressive or being too critical, the Phoenix not transforming fast enough, not adopting this stuff, not really realizing the potential. And the timeframes are always so short, you know, 18 months, 2 years. You know, why aren't we seeing this thing different? And data's not easy, you know, it sounds like it is. It's not as complicated as we make it. Yeah. But at the same time, there's a lot of prep there. There's a lot of organization. There's a lot of dependencies. There's a lot of things that have to go right. So the scapegoat position is the one that sort of leads through. And often you find that it depends on where they sit within the organization, I found as well. Right. You know, if you've got it something that's very business focused, then they're less likely to become a scapegoat. Whereas if it's separate or central or removed or detached, it's very easy to scapegoat somebody that you don't really know, and they've got data in their title, and therefore they can become that person that you focus all of your frustration in.
Well, so the good news, the bad news is if you're interviewing for a new CDO role, chances are for the most part, it's either arsonist or Phoenix for the most part, right? Because, you know, someone is probably, you know, they have one, they're probably the caretaker. If that caretaker stays too long, right, then they're the scapegoat. So for the most part, right, that's usually the two things that you kind of get into. Man, I think they should just like put that on the job description and just, you know, like you're either going to get the Phoenix icon or you're going to get the arsenal, like, hey, both of them will fire, right? But one is a lot more pleasant. You know, we joke, but like there are some CDOs, Matt, and you know this, who are not good at being the arsonist. And there are some CDOs who are not good at being the Phoenix, right? It takes very different skill set, not just technical skill set, although that's important. But I found one of the biggest challenges being a good CDO is getting buy-in, getting business level buy-in, getting alignment. And if you can't do that, you're going to be limited in terms of productivity, in terms of what you could actually get done. And so you might come in as an arsonist and then instantly skip the Phoenix and become scapegoat because you can't get anything done. So that's something I've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is those different things. And that's why these sort of categorizations are really, really key. Understanding the culture of the organization you're going into and the motivation of those that are wanting to do it. It's very interesting. And we're going to come on to Fabric and why that's such a good, you know, that why it's a good fit. But these kind of roles, these kind of challenges, the other challenge, the reason these sort of categorizations, the reason I've observed these sorts of stages of a career within this space is largely because often it comes down to the individual. And of course, an individual, a CDO, it's impossible for them to fix data because data isn't a one-person game. You know, it is something which becomes a much broader responsibility. It's something that an organization as a whole has to adopt. The comparison I always make is if we think back 20 years, and I know this because my father was one, he was the chief health and safety officer. And loads of companies had chief health and safety officers. And my father, and it's quite ironic that our career paths, completely different fields, followed a very similar kind of mentality. Right. His objective was to say,
because I can see in that role, there's probably some arsonists and some scapegoating happening.
Tearing down your procedures, tearing down your policies, saying things
Yeah.
aren't right, this isn't safe, this isn't this different type of thing. But my father's objective in the way that he transformed was to say, actually, the only way to improve health and safety is I can point all of these things out. I can give you tools and I can give you capabilities that enable you to be safer and to be healthier. But ultimately, if you're going to stare at your phone when you're walking downstairs, you are going to trip and hurt yourself. And I can't stop you doing that. So it moves from being his responsibility. His was to enable you to know that was silly. But actually, when it came into practice, it became a matter of personal responsibility.
Of course. Then very similar when it comes to data. You can give people the tools, but you can still, it's very, very likely if someone doesn't know what they're doing, they can still get themselves in trouble.
Exactly right. And if we talk about sort of your health and your safety, if you're going to stare at your phone walking downstairs, you're going to hurt yourself. If you're not going to pay attention to entering the right data into a system, and you're not going to give it personal responsibility, the result could be someone hurts themselves because the decision is wrong, or it could be a company makes an incorrect decision and it costs them money, or it could be that, you know, a myriad of different things.
GenAI data gets exposed.
Or whatever it might be. So that personal responsibility, that transition to personal responsibility is absolutely key. Well, how do you do that when all of your traditional organizations around data are removed from that personal responsibility and almost adopt that personal responsibility, giving that scapegoat mode a very easy target?
You make a good point, and the shining light, Matt, I would say, is I'm starting to see a few, not a lot, I'm starting to see a few companies where they are taking the steps to ensure that the end users understand the personal responsibility. And they're taking steps to ensure that they can allow the end users, give them the guidelines, give them the training, give them the notification, and actually getting the end users on board that, yeah, if I still look at my phone and walk downstairs, that's on me. I'm totally not blaming the data team. The data team gave me everything. They gave me the guidelines, they gave me the training, they even gave me guardrails. But if I still chose to do this, then that's totally on us, on the business. And that's the first time I've seen it, by the way. And I actually, I'm seeing this in a couple of places, which gives me hope, right? That, you know, this misalignment between the data and the business team might, you know, people are actually taking proactive steps to solve, which gives me hope that there could be an increase in CDO longevity. So yeah, for what it's worth, I'm seeing a few data points. We need to see more of it, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that trend that pushes through. And I think what's really fascinating for me is that often the people that have a tendency to complain about data and across, you know, every organization I've been in, you know, our data is awful, you know, is that standard mantra. But it doesn't help you because, you know, like, which bit of it, all of it, like in general, or is there a specific part that is actually awful? And is it really awful, or is it that you can't get to it, or is it that you can't access it, or is it that it's not telling you what you thought you knew and the data is giving you something different and you know for a fact it's wrong? The thing that's also fascinating about it is those same individuals, what they don't realize is that in a better operating model and a better enabled organization, actually fixing all of that is within their own gift. You know, it's not to point at a CDO and say, fix this for me. It's actually that other way around. It's to say, well, actually, you know, you can fix this.
Right.
And realizing that they actually are in control of their own destiny. And I think it's demystifying data. That it's not actually that complicated, because you know, if you enter this data, you create this data, and actually if you create it better, or if you assure that creation better, then everything that you get from it is going to tell you more of what you want or expect to hear. I mean, of course, you'll still get bad news from it, but it won't be a surprise because you'll know that it's accurate. And actually, I think that devolution, that spreading of that accountability, much in the same way that my father was doing with personal responsibility, that's the thing that will slowly start to change the game. And how do you enable that?
Yeah, this is where, like, I'm personally very bullish, right, and excited around GenAI, because I think GenAI has brought forth this desire for self-service, speed, right? I want to do it. I want to get to the end result quickly. And I think the fortunate side effect of that is that you are actually able to now have these conversations and ask the end users, or to basically take responsibility, right? Or know the guidelines, or be able to see the impact of their actions. Because I think we couldn't do this for the longest time because it took so long to just go and get the data and pipeline the data, transform data. And by the time you actually got something to someone, like weeks or months have gone by. It was really hard for someone to see the impact of their actions, right? But with new technologies like GenAI, with data fabric, where you can do this without waiting for the data to move and all that stuff, I actually think it's now possible, right, to have these conversations and say, look, I know you didn't mean it, but in real time, I'm going to show you the impact of your actions. And I think most people are going to say, oh, I didn't know that was happening. I didn't know this was the output and what the impact was going to be. Okay, I'm totally on board, right, with making the changes I need to. So I'm personally kind of excited, right? Like if trends like Fabric and GenAI continue, we actually might get there, Matt, right? To what we're talking about.
I genuinely believe we can. And I think it's that, for me, I think when you look across, when I'm looking across all of these different facets of what we're trying to do, it comes down to having that visibility. It comes down to having that instant gratification and that visibility.
Yes.
And it's how quickly. So often when we talk about data quality and we talk about how we improve these things or how these things flow through, again, because of that big cycle, because it goes into the system, and you say, you get a big push on quality and everyone goes out and says, correct all of your data, and people do it, and then it comes back. And then again, like you say, it gets through the machine and then something comes out, and it could be weeks between that. And you don't get that instant gratification that says, I've changed this and it's instantly affected that.
Yeah.
And how do you get those two things close together? The difference between your data products, which drive your analytics, and your data creation, which is where you create and store all of your data. And how do you push these things closer together so that changing one thing has an almost immediate effect on the other? And that's that kind of thing that says, how do we do that in an enabling way? How do we start to enable the business to do that?
Right.
And how do we then enable them further so they're not waiting on a reporting team to deliver them a dashboard that they invariably won't use or won't like?
Because they didn't know they won't use it until after they waited 8 weeks for it.
By which point they've kind of moved on. There's something else. There's a new flavor. There's a new thing that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And I think the irony of it is that most companies, yes, they have several data sources or things to connect to, but there are only so many major systems in an organization, in realistic terms that essentially store all of this data, which can give you all of this answer.
It's the good old 80-20 rule, right? The 20% responsible for 80% of the data that's actually you care about, right? Yeah.
And that's the thing. And I think with the advent of GenAI and the ability to accelerate the way that you build analytics and accelerate the way that you can get data products created, and also, and this is the massive thing for me, is that, to take away depending on the organization you're in, some organizations have, the level of funding which affords bigger departments, bigger, more engineers, more data scientists than those others. Other companies don't have that luxury. And with the advent of GenAI and the ability, if you can connect to your data much easier and you can get to that data and it is available and discoverable, you use GenAI to say, build me a product that does this.
Kind of a big equalizer for those companies.
It really is. It sort of levels that out. And it sort of says, now I can start building products if I'm a casual data user, an accountant, that uses a lot of data, but, potentially isn't what you would call a data professional. Suddenly you're giving them the enablement through GenAI to be a data professional. They're already building products. Yeah. Admittedly, most of them tend to be spreadsheets, but that not that there's anything wrong with that, but because you've got a spreadsheet user, those folks, they care about the data that goes into those spreadsheets. They care about the analytics that they're building. They care about the quality of the data they're putting through, and they care about the outputs. You see, with the advent of GenAI, now instead of it being locked in their personal productivity, it's something that they can share, because they can actually ask and develop and get all of those head starts.
Well, and to your point, because of the timing, the speed at which you can get the output, you haven't lost interest, you haven't moved on, right? Which is actually very critical, because what a lot of people probably don't realize, or maybe data guys like us realize it all too well, is that when you make that initial request to your data team, I need X, that process starts and they don't stop until they're done, unfortunately, right? They don't know that because it took 2 weeks, you're not going to look at it. They're going to keep cranking. Sometimes it takes 4 weeks, sometimes it takes 6 weeks. It's very similar to engineering, right? Development, where you're building a product, right? You give the engineer the specs, this is what you have to build. Great, I'm going to go build it. And, when you're in startup mode, like me, you can't say, great, we'll have this released in 6 months. No, the customer's moved on. And it's very similar in analytics internally. Your customer has moved on. And so I think that's what's actually very powerful and very important about GenAI, in terms of it puts that time limit kind of back into manageable and relevant and actually useful domain for people. And so, and part of like why I think that can happen is that it's not just GenAI, throw an LLM on a data warehouse, right? And you're done. It's actually more complicated than that. It's to make the best of your LLM, right? How do you make sure you're leveraging, governance, internal access control? How do you make sure you're leveraging internal semantics layer, things from your catalog, things from usage, things from crowdsourcing? There's a lot that has to happen that people manually do today. And that's why, obviously, I'm excited about Data Fabric. Gartner has written a lot of great reports saying the Data Fabric architecture is actually really well suited for GenAI, because the fabric has all that information already automatically. So the LLM only has one place to go to, right? And get all that, and then you benefit from all that to automatically use those inputs to make those decisions and get you good, accurate results. And so, Matt, I know you guys won the UK IT Awards last year for Best Data Project, right, on Data Fabric. Shameless plug, you guys are a Data Fabric customer, Prometheum. Love for you to maybe, chat a little bit about kind of why did you guys embark on that Data Fabric journey, right? And kind of what you were thinking of getting out of it.
I think there's some horrible statistics that you see. I think somewhere between 88 and 92%, depending on which statistic you use, but it's somewhere around 90% of data projects fail, right?
I believe it.
And I'm sure in my career I've been, part of that statistic myself.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah. And I think, when you've got that level of statistic against you, you have to ask yourself the question, well, look, we've all been doing different flavors of the same thing for years. And if I've got a 90 to 92% chance of failing anyway, well, I'd rather fail at something that has an outside chance of actually succeeding and doing something different.
This is like Einstein's definition of insanity, right? You keep doing the same thing but expecting different results.
Exactly right. And it's a horrible statistic. And as a data professional, you kind of sit there and go, oh God, what a horrible statistic. And again, it's a nuanced thing, right? It's a general perspective of how these things run. And I think it goes back to some things around the roles and some things around what we're doing. And it's all about that personal empowerment. And so a lot was made of data mesh and the data mesh model. And it looks fantastic. Smaller analytics, lots of products, interconnected.
Push out to the user, to the business.
Pushing it out to the business. Yeah. That's fantastic. How do you enable them? How do you keep control of that, right? And of course, that's where a lot of that fear comes in. That fear says, if I let this scatter, suddenly I'm going to be in a situation where I've got a data estate I can't manage, I can't see, and I can't get any value from. So what do you do differently to try and empower your business users to give them that capability so they have access to that data, they can build their product, but you keep it tightly coupled so that those products have to be interoperable. They need to be part of the same platform. Your development environment and your connection environments are the same things. Your catalog for products and sources are part and parcel of the same interaction, so that if a product is built, you know what it's built from. You don't have to see it.
You can access it, as opposed to, let's hope this metadata or this description was updated recently, as opposed to, well, it was updated 18 months ago, which has traditionally been the problem, right, for catalogs and metadata management.
Exactly right. And of course, then saying, well, once someone's built something, I don't want a catalog that says somebody's built something. I want a catalog which is also a marketplace that says somebody's built something, and I click here and now I can use it. I can interact with it. I can get value from it,
right,
without having these different component parts, all excellent in their own right.
But that goes back to what we're talking about, where only the big companies could afford this because they can put 40 people in each operation,
right? All of this different stuff.
Right.
And what you want to be able to say is, I'm building a product, and I'm building a product that somebody else has already built. And you want to again, and that brings back that AI piece to say, well, stop. Somebody's already built this. Hang on a minute. Like, are you now rebuilding something different? And you want to be able to have that ability to say, if someone has built something, who owns it? How often will it be refreshed? What's the SLA on it? What's it used for?
What is it being used for?
Exactly. How do you bring all of that together to empower a business that wants to operate in a mesh-like fashion? And so that forces us down this road that says, oh, there isn't any way that does it, because there's lots of things that do it if you first of all move all of your data and spend all of that time updating all of that data into something big. And
this is where you become the arsonist. That's the journey. That's the journey of being the arsonist.
Being an arsonist. I don't like that. But I think the reason for that is because that is a massive effort. It's a huge effort. It's a massive precursor to value, right? And the thing is, you might have a system that you think has value, but you want to connect to and test that it has value, and you might find it doesn't. But if you're doing a warehouse program or a lake house program,
it's too late.
Upfront.
It's too late.
Yeah, no, that's rubbish. I don't need any of that.
Right.
And it sort of gives you that acceleration, but it also enables me to push that stuff out to a broader audience, give them tools and capabilities that we're not so heavily dependent on big tech teams to deliver stuff in traditional ways. And that's where that came about. Now, for me personally, the Fabric journey started about 10 years ago. I'd seen bits and bobs of this sort of thing that had been scattered around and built an architecture that said, well, this is what I would like. But it was a little bit of a security company, or it was a little part of an integration company, or a virtualization engine that couldn't perform, and so on and so forth. And so you got all these different component parts, and you stood back at it and went, that's what I want. And it's taken sort of the last sort of 10 years or so for this kind of connected idea to come to the point where, well, hang on a minute. Now we're at a point where actually the tech has caught up. Now we're at a point where these different component parts are being put together in a way that you could call it a fabric.
Right.
You could actually say this is a fabric,
right,
as opposed to, a connected ecosystem on something that you first had to move all of your data into.
Right. The concept was there, the desire was there, but the technology was not there, right? I think we all, I remember having this conversation with customers. I remember me as a data practitioner and on both sides going, gosh, like someone should just have one product where like you can do all this without jumping through 10 different ones, finding 10 different tickets and waiting for people to get back to. But the tech wasn't there, right? And cloud wasn't there, right? And so like for me, like when I started the company over 6 years ago, I took a bet that like, okay, I think cloud's going to be a thing, and it's going to give us the innovation that we need. Machine learning and AI was still pretty early, but like, I was kind of betting that it'll get better, and NLP, natural language processing, was also going to get better. And so, thankfully, luckily, right, the trends happened the way it happened and allow us to do kind of what we did today. But no, I hear you. I think it's something that as data practitioners, we've thought about this for a long time. And I was talking to a chief architect of a large telco, and like literally within 5 minutes, he was like, I feel like we've known each other for 10 years because we both share the same vision. I'm like, yeah, no, I totally understand. And so they're kind of starting this journey that you've been on. But like, congrats on winning that award. I mean, I think that's huge, right? Most innovative IT.
Well, we've got to go back again. We've got to go back again. So we got the innovation for the strategy.
Yeah.
Give ourselves a year. We want to go back and win it for the whole thing being in. So
Hey,
so
you're kind of giving me a lot of pressure now, man.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely, well deserved pressure. But I do think it's been it's a transformation journey, and I do think there is a lot of legacy of things that had started to move this way, and a lot of battle scars, because it all seems very obvious, you know. And like I say, if you've been in data for a long time, you kind of look at it and go, yeah, that sounds fantastic. And I think there's still a journey to go on. And like you said, there's things that will improve and there are things that will get round. But also, you've got a healthy dose of cynicism on, yeah, I've kind of heard this before, that you're also battling against. And I think, you know, that again, it comes back to people and the process and that whole cultural piece that says, if you enable them effectively and you get them to realize that this is now within their own gift and that what they see is the same thing that they create.
Yeah.
You know, they created this data and now they're seeing what they've created. And if they need to change it, they get that benefit of instant quality uplift by changing the things that are wrong. But that's within their own gift.
Yeah.
And that's the thing you want to see. You want to see, you know, I will consider this to be done, a done deal. I will consider to say, yes, okay, now I'm moving into caretaker mode, when I can sit back and say, truly, there isn't an awful lot left for me to do. You know, literally the business is running its own data. And
well, I want to enable you. I want to make sure that we're there as a partner for you. So would it be fair to say that you are on the path to being a phoenix right now?
We're fully in. I was very fortunate. This my current role. I think a lot of the fires had already been lit. When I came in, there was a realization that we needed to change. Which is great, and that's what you want. You want to be in that position where you that realization of change, and I give credit to my peers, my colleagues, and the leadership is they are ambitious, you know, and I think that's very, very important. They're having that ambition to try and do something that is different and will have that bigger impact. I mean, I wouldn't say it's risky. I don't believe it's risky. Because I think the rewards are great. And I think you're not losing anything from it. And there are many ways to do these different things. And I think it's shaping the practical implementation of a fabric against a mesh backdrop. And I was very lucky that the operating model, the mesh operating model, was something that had already been fired up and already been lucidly put out. And that's had a couple of years to mature. Right. If anything, now it's the fabric that's under pressure to say, hey, I've got this great operating model. Come on.
Yeah, let's go.
Enable me, give me the tools, which is a nice place to be.
It is, and I think you and I kind of always saw eye to eye on that. I thought the mesh operating model concept was great, but when I kind of dug into it, I know Zamak did a great job kind of writing it up from ThoughtWorks, but like I knew from my infrastructure background, like this was going to be a hell of a project on the infrastructure side. Which may have been great for like big SIs and so forth, but I didn't see any practical or quick or feasible or inexpensive way for a company to get there. And so I think to me at that point was, well, if you have the fabric, if you have the foundation, right, of all the connectivity, all the single governance layer and so forth, the access layer, what if you can build the access model? What if you can build the mesh model on top of that and build the capabilities, right, on top of that? To me, that made the most sense, right? And so build the self-service, functionality. And look, I think GenAI came a long way and kind of helped accelerate that big time. And so like, for me, I don't really see mesh and fabric so different anymore. I actually think, what's the point of having a fabric if you're not going to use it like as the mesh operating model, right? And so for me, the fabric is a means to an end, right? I know we're meeting with the data fabric guys, but like I really see it. If you're not using the fabric to help empower the business, to help empower self-service, right, to make it much faster and easier to build data products, yeah, it's nice having a single layer or a virtual layer. You can find our data connect. It's nice, but I think you're missing kind of that capability, and that's it's nice to kind of folks like you, see eye to eye with us on that. Good to see kind of the Gartner research also has started to kind of confirm that as well, right? So I think that's kind of exciting, right? I think
Yeah.
we've now entered where, if you remember in like 2021, I remember going to Big Data London in like 21, 22, and it was like mesh versus fabric, right? There's all these conversations, and it really isn't that. So like for the last year or so, I've been telling people, guys, it's not what it's about, right? Great operating model, mesh, great foundational product, fabric, but build the enabling capabilities on the fabric, and you have the best of both worlds. So,
Exactly that. Yeah, the mesh versus it was interesting. It was one of the first things I was introduced to. And in a lot of places it's like, oh, we've gone for mesh, but there was a very smart chap would gave me a paper actually on mesh versus fabric, saying that these were two different ways of doing things, and I'm kind of looking at it going, because I never saw the mesh as technical,
right.
It was never a technical. It was never.
And I don't think Zamak intended.
No, I don't think you're right.
It was
really about how do you get inherent pieces of value from SMEs, and how do you connect all of those things together? And I think as an operating model, it's brilliant. But if you don't have the tech that enables that operating model, and I hate it, and it's a terrible word, but manages and controls and governs that operating model, you spin out of control, and so the mesh model, and you've read the book, so have I, or the papers, and so have I. It suggests that we do all of these things, and of course, you've got your core teams, your data teams. They absolutely panic at this idea, and quite rightly. It's a terrifying idea. Like, in order to do this, the way we do this is we have SQL Server, or we have Snowflake, or we have Databricks, or whatever it might be. What are you saying? We're going to just give this to lots and lots of people to spin up storage areas and all the rest of it, as a sort of as a data professional, that's suddenly petrifying, because the mesh papers don't talk about how you do that. It's so the operating
right. And by the way, you're fighting like 30 years of IT policy, by the way, right? IT and security policy when you do that. So I totally agree, right? And again, it's not don't do it. It's come up with a way like the fabric that allows you to do that in a secure, safe manner without getting into trouble, without spending a lot of money, without violating security and trust. That's really what it's all about. It's not saying it's bad and don't do it. It's like, look, the output is going to be great. The outcome is going to be great. Let's put bumper rails, put guidance, put protection around the process so we don't get in trouble. But we can't stymie it. We can't stop it, because then you'll never get to the output.
And that's right. And then, so you ended up with this thing that sort of said, for me, you ended up with this sort of yin and yang. There's top and bottom. You can't really operate a mesh if you haven't got a fabric to support it. And there's really no point in having a fabric if you're not going to operate in a mesh. And so you end up with, yes, these are essentially quintessentially linked topics.
Should I call it a data fesh now?
Well, maybe. Name it brings it together.
Maverick.
We've just got people comfortable with the idea of mesh and fabric. Let's leave it there. I think that's the big trick, isn't it? You've got these two sides, and one is very much about content, and one is very much about managing that content, connecting that content, and keeping it all together and giving you that observability. And that's really where we wanted to get to. And I think it's also about, what's your capacity? Do you have the resources? Can you afford to have great big data engineering teams? Can you afford to have more and more people? And of course, part of the reason that 92% or 90 to 92% failure rate exists is because your customers, your data consumers, don't feel engaged. They don't feel that they got what they wanted from the program. So if you make them part of that program and give them the capability to essentially build their own products, you're making them part of it. Exactly. People are far less likely to tell you that it's a failure if they're part of it. So maybe we've got a better.
And the chances of it failing is also a lot lower now, because you're getting the input and the involvement of the people who actually want to consume and know what to do with it. much earlier on in the process, as opposed to at the very end of the process.
And that's the thing, I mean, most data professionals can be very good with data. You can be very good with technology. You can be very good with governance. You can know the rules, the compliance, the legalities. You can understand security and privacy. You can understand the ins and outs and the plumbing of the infrastructure.
Yeah.
But when it really comes down to it, unless you work in a particular function, as a detached data professional, as much as you want to be part of it, you're never going to understand the data as well as the person that works with that every single day. You're
100%.
never going to understand that subject matter as well as they are.
100%. Right.
And
when I was on the finance, FP&A, sales operations side, where I knew the data, I knew the business, I knew how much SKUs we're selling, what we need to do. If it looks bad, it looks off. I didn't know how to do the ETL at the time. I didn't know how to do all the complex stuff, but I could tell the IT guy or the data engineer, like, in 1 second, this is wrong, right? This is wrong. I can't use it. And so I did what people unfortunately still do today. I take it, I take it to data and I put it in a spreadsheet, and then I manipulate the spreadsheet, and then I create, I do all my stuff in Excel, right? And this is, I mean, man, that was 20 years ago, and people are still doing it. People are still doing it. You see memes now online, or I don't know if you've seen the one that said, "If your dashboard is so good, why am I still making spreadsheets?" Right?
and it's a fascinating point on dashboards. I mean, yes, they look flashy. Like,
Yes.
yeah, people think that they look flashy, but people don't look at them. Don't. You only have to look at the usage stats, and I find it a very fascinating thing. Yes, they're important, and yes, there's lots of people that do, because they become part of their job.
Yeah.
And absolutely, it has that value to it. But as a general rule, as you get up, people want to know an answer, right? And actually, all the ultimate one is an answer.
Where NLP and GenAI started changing the game, because as much as I love creating fancy and pretty dashboards, I can tell you, 90% of the people I presented the dashboards to could not read or understand a dashboard to save their lives. Like, you're like, hey, it's so freaking obvious, man. Look, look at this. Lines going down. No bueno, no bueno. And
you think
that the whole room blank stares until you finally say, this is really bad. We should be concerned. And so with GenAI and NLP, I think that's what you're getting is you don't need to be a data savvy or data literate person that can actually interpret the dashboards. Like, this is where like AI generated descriptions and narrations actually becomes very helpful. This graph shows you are about to lose money. A lot of money in the next 90 days. Okay. That's all I need to know.
I think you get to a point with the GenAI and the graphing and the dashboarding is, people want to see an answer to a question. So dashboard developers, BI developers, and I'm the same. I mean, I've used everything from reporting services to business objects to Tableau to Power BI, you name it. I've used all of these different tools. And you have this desire to, like, when you're in those sorts of roles, to make the best dashboard you can. And I see them around our organization, and you look at it and you think, my God, the amount of work that must have gone into it. I can't read it. I can't understand a word on it. There's too much on a screen. It's busy, but I appreciate the amount of work that must have gone into it. And actually, it might not be what you're after. You're after a specific question. And the reason people don't like that so much anymore, and particularly at an executive level, is they don't want to hunt through a report. Yes. Or they don't want to hunt through a dashboard. Yes. To be given an answer that they want, which is a one-word answer or a one-number answer. Like, they want to be able to get at that a lot quicker. And I think, like I say, I think the generative AI, that kind of thing, I even think speech is a potential that's coming through, where your exec gets out of bed in the morning and they say, "Give me my morning briefing, Alexa," and what you get is a spew from your company that essentially interprets that data into a conversation. I think there's a huge opportunity to get you to that, to get us to those points where the relevant information is much more accessible to you as an individual. And I also think, again, with the AI, the machine learning, and also about picking up your habits, is if I wake up every morning and I ask for a particular sales figure, for example, or I ask for a particular notification, and I do that every morning, that it learns that that's the thing I'm most interested in, and therefore can start to pick things around that says,
Right.
you're interested in this number, but you might also be interested in this,
Right.
which is why you have this
Exactly.
number. And it starts
exactly. And it actually has a nice kind of cohort side effect, and that is if your data team knows, that's what you keep asking, and they see the statistics of, oh my gosh, it looks like 3,000 people have asked for this in the last week. Guess where I'm prioritizing data quality? Guess where I'm prioritizing data engineering work? Guess where I'm prioritizing performance, right? Whereas before, we kind of knew it was always kind of like the squeaky wheel. Well, we'll get the grease. Like whoever yells the loudest and has, the most juice in an organization, they get what they want. But now you can actually see it with data in real time. Like, okay, clearly this is a really important topic, important question to folks. Guys, if we do nothing this week and we just make sure the data feeding this to generate this answer is going to be fast, accurate, reliable, that's a win. In my opinion, that's a win for the data team. That's a win for the business, right?
I think you're right, because it's becoming less generic.
Yeah.
When you again, it comes down to that thing. Our data's rubbish. Well, okay, great. Okay. Is that because once you really got down to it, that one question and that one data point was in fact rubbish? And so is it that's rubbish? Right. And has that led you to believe that all data is rubbish? And I think, because of the way that people are asking specific questions, you're getting much greater specificity, which is also saying there's a bunch of data you've got back here, and 60% of it, no one cares about. And that's the other thing, because there's a lot of data in organizations. When you try and fix data quality and you say, fix data quality, wow.
I have a joke. No, it's not really a joke. It's actually sadly based on truth, right? Prior to founding Prometheum, I was president and CEO of a data catalog company. And so catalogs, you deal with data quality all the time, right? And the tool helps you with data quality. There's a shocking high statistic of anytime one of our customers was assigned to data quality, it was like, okay, he's not going to be around. He's not going to be around 69
Exactly right. Because it's huge. Whereas, and like you say, with that specificity that says, actually, that's the bit I was interested in.
Right.
And the ability to observe that, well, now you improve that piece of data quality. And if half your organization is asking for that piece of information, and that piece of information gets more accurate, the noise around our data being rubbish, it starts to drop down. It starts to fall away, because you're focusing on the things that people are most interested in the right ways.
I like to say, if you're going to come over to my house for dinner, and I know you're going to be in the dining room and the kitchen, I'm going to make sure I clean those two rooms.
Yeah.
I'm not going to show you my garage. I'm not going to show you my man cave. I'm not going to show you master. And so if I have a short amount of time to optimize and lead you to think I'm a very clean and orderly guy, guess what? Like, those are the two rooms I focus on, right? And I think if people can do the same thing, if data teams can get that same level of clarity and guidance, that's a win. And this is where I think with GenAI and Data Fabric, you take a question-centric approach as opposed to the data-centric approach. Let me move everything, and then you sort through the mess and eventually find it. No. The question, like you said, is very, very specific. The question tells me exactly what I'm looking for. Oh, great. That's exactly what I'm going to build. And then when you verify it's good, that's exactly what I'm going to do to make sure the quality is good, the performance is good, the security is good. But now it's laser focused, and you avoid building things that nobody ever looks at, right? So this is where I think like it all kind of comes full circle together, right? And it's a beautiful thing.
I agree. I think that's as we've gone through these sort of journeys, you're getting to a point where you can enable more than ever before. I think what's still fascinating is people don't necessarily know the question they're trying to answer. It's always been the other thing that you've got is, my data's rubbish. Okay, well, what do you want to know from the data? I don't know. And it's that sort of chicken and egg. You give them the tools that said, ask this thing what you want.
Yeah. Or even better, now with AI is, here's my data. Tell me some interesting things I should know about. Right. This is what's kind of cool. Right. And I laugh when you say that people don't really know that, because I've been guilty. I've been one of those guys. Right. I'm like, hey, every product transaction for the last 30 years in the company, from every region, every day. And like, Yeah, the IT and data team look at me like, dude, no, you're gonna crash our data warehouse. Like, I'm like, and that pipeline's gonna take forever. And I was like, well, I don't know what to limit. And that's actually a real challenge for business folks is that you have an idea, an inkling, but it's may not even be in the right country. And without looking at the data, you're not even going to get to the right house, right? And so if there's a way to actually look at the data, see what it could do in a way that's not going to cause all this disruption, right? You don't have to wait to move the data. You don't have to consume a lot of money for it. I think it's always easier to enable with technology than to force human beings to change their habits. I think it's a losing battle. Human beings are hard to get a human being. I need you to change the way you think. Good luck. Good luck. I haven't figured out how to do that, right, in 2 decades. And so I think this is where the power of like Gen AI, data fabric, these type of technologies working together. It's like, well, I can show you really quickly. I can tell you really quickly. So very quickly, I can go from country to postal code, maybe country to street, right? And then once you're in the street, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, it's that house, right? 8 Privet Drive or whatever like that I want to go to. That's the one I want to get to, right? So I think
you also exposed yourself as a Harry Potter fan. I'm just letting you know.
I am guilty. I am very, very guilty of that. I think this is a Harry Potter household. Ironically, my wife has watched the movies 20 times, but have fallen asleep through all of them. She's never actually physically completed one movie.
You see, you can't watch the movies. You have to read the books.
I gave up once they exceeded 1,000 pages. I think Prisoner of Azkaban was the last book I physically read. I was like, look, it's becoming like a carry-on luggage by itself.
We were very cruel with our kids. They weren't allowed to watch the movies till they finished the books.
Ah,
Because the books are better. And all of the books are better. But it's one of those different things. But I agree. I think as you start to narrow down, it's all about that narrowing down, isn't it? It's all about getting to that detail. And it's actually knowing where to start, because like I say, a data professional is not an SME. An SME, they're an SME about data.
Right.
And about data platforms or data capabilities or governance or all those different things.
Right.
They're not necessarily an SME about.
They can't tell you if it's right or wrong. They can't tell you like, hey, this revenue figure looks right. These transmission figures look off. Like that's not their job.
Right. No, and I think that's where we go back to sort of those different types of roles for those CDOs. That's often how you end up being scapegoat, because you are expected to know that level of SME detail, and you never will. The nice thing with working with data is you can get there quite quickly because you've got all of the data to hand, so you can learn about an organization very, very quickly. But to the degree that the person over there, this person over here, which checks this every single day and utilizes that data to ensure that someone's safe, or this person over here that utilizes this data to know the throughput, or this person over here that understands the finances or the overspend, unless you are part of that world and your objectives and your skills and your capabilities and your expertise is brought to bear, you will always have that slight disconnect to the data. And that's how you end up with fabric, mesh, and that's the idea of the Phoenix role that says, okay, we've been doing this like this for 30 years.
Yeah.
Right. Let's empower, let's push this thing out. Let's do something different. And it all sounds fantastic. I am going to say this is not easy.
No.
You are fighting against conventional wisdom. You are fighting against people looking at you a bit saying, well, what, you actually want this to be my responsibility? I'm not sure I like that. It's like, yes, I want
the humans that are hard.
Yeah. And so you have all of these different things where, even though people are empowered and it's within their gift, it's a gift they might not want. It's something they might want to return. So you've got challenges.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we find. But, for me, it's an exciting journey. This is, I'm very lucky, like I say, that this is something people want to pursue because they feel that it's the right thing to do. And if you're in that lucky situation, then you have the legs to push that forward. But
absolutely. Well, Matt, I feel like we could probably do 2 or 3 podcasts in one go. So, but I know it's getting late for you over there, so I'm going to let you go. But always a pleasure. Matt Clark, data leader, National Grid Energy Transmissions. Thank you so much for being on this podcast with me. Really enjoyed it, and we're honored at Prometheum to be on this data fabric journey with you. So thanks so much.
Brilliant. Take care.